How do you smile when your heart is cracking wide open? I asked myself that question the night my loyalty was auctioned off like a forgotten relic. 6 years of late nights, silent sacrifices, missed birthdays, all swept aside in a single moment, replaced by the hollow clinking of champagne glasses raised for someone else. I stood there, holding a glass I no longer wanted, smiling a smile I no longer believed in, realizing the people I trusted had never intended to keep their promises. This isn't just a story about betrayal, it's about the moment I understood, painfully and completely, that my life was about to split in two, the one I had built for them, and the one I would finally reclaim for myself. If you've ever swallowed heartbreak in silence, if you've ever been forced to start over when the world you built crumbled beneath you, you're not alone. Hit subscribe. Drop a comment with where you're tuning in from. And if you've ever carried a silent pain like mine, know this, here. Your voice matters. 6 years. That's how long I'd given Sunridge Innovations my unwavering loyalty, my weekends, my late nights, and the best years of my 20s. I'm Emma Caldwell. And until recently, I was the operations specialist who kept this Austin tech company running like clockwork while receiving little more than appreciative nods and vague promises of advancement. I still remember my first day at Sunridge. The office smelled of fresh paint and ambition. Jason Meyer, our CEO, had that startup energy, charismatic, visionary, always ready with inspirational speeches about growth and company loyalty. Back then, I believed every word. I saw my future unfolding here, climbing the ladder rung by steady rung. You're the backbone of operations. Emma, Jason would say during my performance reviews, his voice dropping confidentially. Between us. I see you as director of operations material. Just keep doing what you're doing. Your time is coming soon. That soon stretched across 6 years. 6 years of solving crises that nobody knew existed because I handled them before they exploded. 6 years of training newcomers who went on to get promotions I was told to wait for. 6 years of ordering goodbye cakes for colleagues moving upward while I remained rooted in place. Still smiling. Still loyal. I organized our quarterly celebration parties with meticulous care, selected the venue, ordered the catering, arranged the seating charts, and prepared the recognition certificates. These parties were Jason's idea. Celebrating success builds company culture, he'd say. I spent hours making sure each detail was perfect because I genuinely believed in celebrating others' achievements. And secretly, I hoped that my dedication would eventually be recognized too. This quarter's party felt different. During our last one-on-one, Jason had lingered after discussing project metrics. Emma, he'd said, tapping his pen against his notebook. You've really stepped up lately. I think it's time we discuss next steps for you. Let's make this quarter's celebration something special. My heart had leapt. Was this finally it? After years of patience, would I finally receive the recognition I deserved? I didn't want to assume, but the possibility lit a fire within me. I spent extra time on this party, upgraded the catering, found a rooftop venue with a stunning Austin skyline view, and even bought a new dress for the occasion, a deep blue number that projected confidence and professionalism. When Brittany Hayes joined our team 2 months ago, I'd taken her under my wing like I had with dozens before her, 23, fresh-faced, with an infectious laugh and the undeniable advantage of being the CFO's niece. I didn't hold her connection against her. Nepotism was an unspoken reality in our industry. I showed her our systems, explained our client relationships, and filled countless gaps in her knowledge base. You're a lifesaver, Emma, she'd say, wide-eyed with gratitude when I'd correct a potentially disastrous mistake in her reports. I don't know what we'd do without you. I liked Brittany. That's what made what happened next so much worse. As I pinned the final decoration to the wall of our rented venue, watching colleagues filter in with expectant smiles, I had no idea that my years of loyalty were about to collide with the harsh reality of corporate politics. I straightened my new dress, checked my notes one last time, and prepared to host another successful celebration, possibly my last as just an operations specialist. How could I have known that the foundation I'd spent years building was about to crumble beneath my feet? The party hummed with conversation and laughter. I'd arranged everything perfectly, fairy lights casting a warm glow across the rooftop venue, Austin's skyline twinkling behind us, the catering table laden with everyone's favorites, colleagues mingled with drinks in hand, and I felt a rare flutter of anticipation in my stomach. Tonight felt different. Jason had been particularly secretive about the announcements, which only fueled my quiet hopes. When Jason tapped his glass with a spoon, the room gradually fell silent. I took my position near the front, clipboard in hand, ready to assist with the awards and recognition certificates I'd prepared. Thanks to everyone for coming tonight, Jason began, with that practiced charisma that had once impressed me so much. Sunridge has had an incredible quarter, and as always, our success comes down to our amazing team. Standard opening. I smiled on cue, scanning the faces around me. Rachel, my trusted colleague from accounting, caught my eye and gave me a subtle thumbs up. She knew how long I'd been waiting for this moment. Before we get to our usual recognitions, I have a special announcement to make. Jason continued, and my heart quickened its pace. As you know, leadership is about recognizing potential and rewarding innovation. Tonight, I'm thrilled to announce a well-deserved promotion. This was it. 6 years of dedication. 6 years of canceled plans and missed family events. 6 years of being the first one in and the last one out. I took a deep breath and straightened my shoulders. Please join me in congratulating our newest Director of Operations, Brittany Hayes. The room erupted in applause. I froze. Clipboard pressed against my chest like a shield. Surely I'd misheard. But no, Brittany was making her way forward, her face flushed with excitement, accepting handshakes and embraces as she moved through the crowd. My ears rang. Blood rushed to my face. The clipboard in my hand suddenly felt impossibly heavy. 2 months. She'd been with the company for 2 months. Jason continued, his voice seemingly distant, though he stood just feet away. Brittany has shown exceptional promise and fresh thinking. Sometimes new eyes are exactly what a company needs to move forward. Rachel's horrified expression from across the room confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't a mistake. This was a calculated decision that had never included me in the equation. Then came the moment that would replay in my mind for weeks. Jason put his arm around Brittany's shoulders and turned to me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Emma, you might want to take notes from Brittany here. This is the kind of innovative thinking that gets noticed. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter moved through the room. I stood there, the target of pitying glances from colleagues who had watched me train, person after person, only to see them climb past me. Someone thrust a champagne glass into my hand. My face felt frozen in a smile that threatened to shatter like thin ice. A toast, Jason called out, raising his glass. To Brittany and the future of Sunridge. I raised my glass mechanically, nodding when appropriate, congratulating Brittany when she approached me with a slightly guilty expression. Thanks for everything you taught me. Emma, she whispered, hugging me briefly. You'll do great, I heard myself say, my voice coming from somewhere outside myself. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I excused myself to check on the catering multiple times, retreating to the bathroom where I pressed cold paper towels against my burning eyes. I made small talk. I collected empty plates. I maintained the facade of the perfect team player while something essential collapsed inside me. As the party wound down and I supervised the cleanup, because of course that was still my responsibility, I caught Jason watching me from across the room. For a second, I thought I glimpsed uncertainty in his expression, perhaps even guilt, but then he turned away, laughing at something the CFO said. In my car, long after everyone had left, I sat with my hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at the darkened building. 6 years of memories cascaded through my mind, the late nights, the solved crises, the grateful emails, the promises. With trembling fingers, I pulled out my laptop, opened a new document, and typed 2 words: I resign. How much of your life do you give to people who never intended to value it in the first place? The resignation letter flowed from my fingers like a confession, professional, succinct, void of emotion, 2 weeks' notice, no explanation required. I hit send at 3:17 a.m. and slept better than I had in months. Morning brought clarity instead of regret. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed. Greg Sutton had been Sunridge's COO until Jason had forced him out last year. Creative differences. The official statement had claimed. In reality, Greg had been the ethical compass that Jason found increasingly inconvenient. 3 months ago, Greg had reached out, starting something new. He'd said over coffee, Nexus Point Technologies. When you're ready to work somewhere, your talents are actually valued. Call me. I'd thanked him politely and filed the offer away, a backup plan I never thought I'd need. Loyalty had been my defining trait for too long. Now, standing in my kitchen, watching dawn break over Austin, I dialed his number. Emma, everything okay? Greg answered, concern in his voice at the early hour. Is that COO position still available at Nexus Point? I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. The pause on the other end lasted just a second. For you? Absolutely. When can we talk details? Today, I said, feeling the first spark of something new ignite in my chest. I suddenly find my schedule opening up. I spent the weekend reorganizing my files and preparing transition documents. No one from Sunridge reached out, not even a read receipt on my resignation email. By Sunday evening, I had mapped out everything my replacement would need, whether they deserved my thoroughness or not. I wouldn't leave chaos in my wake. That wasn't who I was. Monday morning, I dressed with unusual care, charcoal pencil skirt, crisp white blouse, the red blazer I saved for client meetings, war colors. Though I hadn't thought of it that way before, the office felt different as I walked in. As though my changed perspective had altered the physical space itself, Rachel intercepted me at the coffee machine. Is it true? She whispered, eyes wide. You're leaving? Apparently Jason just read my email, I said, watching our boss storm through the office toward his corner office. 3 days later. Emma! Jason's voice boomed down the corridor. My office. Now! Rachel squeezed my arm. Whatever you do, don't cry. I almost laughed. Tears felt like a distant memory, replaced by something colder and clearer. Jason was pacing when I entered. My resignation letter displayed on his monitor. What is this? He demanded, gesturing at the screen as if I'd submitted something obscene. It's called a resignation letter, I replied, taking a seat without being invited to. Standard procedure when an employee decides to pursue opportunities elsewhere. This is ridiculous, he said, running a hand through his hair. If this is about Brittany. It's about 6 years of broken promises, I said quietly, but there's no need to discuss it. My decision is made. His tactics shifted rapidly from dismissal to panic. We can't lose you. Emma, you're essential to operations. What do you want? A raise? A different title? I studied him, seeing him clearly perhaps for the first time. Not the charismatic leader I'd admired, but a man who used others' loyalty as a tool, who made promises he never intended to keep. It's not me who needs this company, I said, rising from my chair. It's this company that needed me. I've prepared transition documents for whoever takes over my responsibilities. They're in the shared drive. I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me at the door. 2 weeks won't be enough time, he said, desperation edging into his tone. We need at least a month for transition. I looked back at him, at the corner office I had once dreamed would be mine. 2 weeks is standard. I've already been more than generous with my time. That afternoon, I met with Greg at Nexus Point's offices, a smaller space than Sunridge's, but filled with natural light and an energy that felt immediately revitalizing. We discussed salary, double what I'd been making, benefits, comprehensive, And responsibilities, expansive. COO. I said, testing the title aloud. Quite a leap from operations specialist. Greg smiled, sliding the contract across the table. Not a leap, a correction. You've been functioning at this level for years without the recognition or compensation. We're just making it official. As I signed my name, I felt something that had been tightly coiled within me for years finally begin to release. Welcome home. Emma, Greg said as we shook hands. That night, I sat on my balcony, watching Austin's lights flicker on as darkness fell. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Office in chaos. Jason making Brittany handle your transition. She's completely overwhelmed. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Freedom. The success or failure of Sunridge was no longer my responsibility. For the first time in 6 years, I allowed myself to imagine a future defined by my own terms. Have you ever realized how much energy it takes to keep hoping for recognition that never comes? The 2 weeks of my notice period unfolded like a slow-motion train wreck, one I observed with detached fascination, rather than the frantic need to fix that had defined my previous 6 years. Brittany appeared at my desk on day 3, clutching a notepad, dark circles already forming under her eyes. Emma, I'm so sorry to bother you, but do you have time to walk me through the Henderson account? They're threatening to pull out, and I can't find the history documents. I pulled up the files I'd meticulously organized and transferred them to her drive. Everything's here. Communication history, contract iterations, pain points. I've highlighted the sections you'll need to focus on. She looked at me with a mixture of gratitude and guilt. I didn't know. I mean, when Jason offered me the position, he made it sound like it would be easy, I finished for her. That's because he never understood what I actually did here. I'm not ready for this, she whispered, the confession tumbling out. I don't know what I'm doing. For a moment, I almost slipped back into my old role, the fixer, the mentor, the backbone. Then I remembered the champagne toast, the laughter at my expense. The transition documents are comprehensive, I said instead, and there's always Jason if you need guidance. Throughout that week, similar scenes played out across departments as systems I'd quietly maintained began failing without my attention. The quarterly report was delayed. A major client called to complain about unaddressed concerns. The office manager quit after a heated exchange with Jason. Rachel kept me updated with daily texts. 4th emergency meeting this week. Jason threw a stapler when he found out you were the only one with access to the primary distribution list. Brittany cried in the bathroom for an hour today. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt increasingly detached. As though watching the ending of a movie I'd already seen too many times, my focus had shifted to preparing for my new role at Nexus Point, studying their client portfolio, and imagining possibilities that had never been open to me before. Then came the call that changed everything. Henderson Group, Sunridge's largest client, reached out directly to me. Emma, said Frank Henderson, his familiar gravelly voice bringing back memories of countless problem-solving calls. I hear you're leaving Sunridge. Mind telling me where you're headed? 2 days later, Henderson Group signed with Nexus Point, citing personnel continuity as their primary reason for the switch. By the end of the week, 2 more major clients had followed suit. I hadn't poached them. I hadn't even suggested it. They had simply followed the person who had actually been serving their needs all along. Jason's frantic email arrived the next day. Emergency. Need to meet ASAP. Please come to the office tomorrow morning. I forwarded it to Rachel, who responded within seconds. Board called emergency session. 3 clients leaving. Toddler's 40% of annual revenue. Complete meltdown. That night, I stood in front of my mirror, trying on outfits for my first day at Nexus Point. The woman who looked back at me was familiar, but changed. Shoulders straighter, eyes clearer. A subtle confidence in her stance that hadn't been there before, for the first time in years. I felt excited about Monday morning. My phone buzzed with another update from Rachel. Jason telling everyone you sabotaged the company. Nobody's buying it. We all saw what happened. I set the phone down without replying. The narrative wasn't mine to control anymore. The truth was revealing itself without my intervention. On my last Friday at Sunridge, I cleaned out my desk early, before most people arrived. 6 years of professional life fit into a surprisingly small box. A few reference books, a plant that had somehow survived my neglect, framed certificates from trainings I'd paid for myself, no photos, no mementos. It struck me how little of myself I had allowed to exist in this space. As I walked toward the elevator, badge already turned in, I heard Jason's voice. Emma, wait! He jogged down the hallway, looking disheveled in a way I'd never seen before, tie askew, hair uncombed, dark shadows under his eyes. You can't leave, he said, slightly out of breath. Not like this. Not with everything falling apart. I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt the last traces of my anger dissolve into something closer to pity. I already have. Have you ever discovered that your absence revealed more about your value than your presence ever could? The email arrived 3 days into my new position at Nexus Point. I was sitting in my corner office, yes, an actual office with windows and a door that closed, reviewing strategic plans with my team when my personal phone buzzed. From Jason. Myra Sunridge Innovations. Calm subject. Urgent meeting request. Emma, we need to talk. Things have taken a turn. I'm willing to make this right. Name the time and place. JM, I set the phone aside and continued the meeting, discussing our approach to integrating the new clients, our new clients, who had followed me not out of loyalty to me personally, but because of the consistent service they knew I could provide. Emma? Greg asked, pulling me back to the present. Your thoughts on the Henderson timeline? I think we can compress it, I replied, mind already mapping out the steps. They're eager to move forward, and we have the capacity if we reallocate resources from the Westfield project temporarily. The meeting continued. Decisions were made, action items assigned. This was leadership as it should be, collaborative, decisive, focused on solutions rather than ego. When we finished, I felt energized rather than drained. Only then did I return to Jason's email. After careful consideration, I replied, from Emma, Caldwell, Nexus Point Tech, calm, subject, urgent meeting request. Jason. I can meet tomorrow at 7:30 a.m. at Corridor Coffee on 5th Street. I have a 30-minute window. Emma. The coffee shop was neutral territory, public enough to keep things professional, quiet enough for an honest conversation. I arrived early, chose a corner table, and ordered my usual Americano. Being early was a habit 6 years at Sunridge hadn't broken. Jason arrived exactly on time, looking like he'd aged years and days. The confident swagger was gone, replaced by tense shoulders and darting eyes. Thank you for meeting me, he said, sliding into the chair across from me. He didn't order anything. You look different. I feel different, I replied simply. What did you want to discuss? He pulled a folder from his briefcase and placed it on the table between us. I'm authorized by the board to offer you this. I opened it slowly, scanning the document inside. A job offer, Vice President of Operations, double my previous salary, stock options, decision-making authority clearly outlined in writing. Everything I had wanted but never received during my 6 years at Sunridge. We made a mistake, Jason said, watching my face carefully. I made a mistake. We didn't realize how central you were to our operations until everything started falling apart. And Brittany? I asked, closing the folder. He winced. Stepping down from the director position, she came to me herself, said she wasn't ready. I nodded, unsurprised. Brittany wasn't the villain in this story. She was just another player in Jason's short-sighted game. I appreciate the offer, I said, sliding the folder back across the table. But I've already accepted a position elsewhere. Whatever they're paying you. We'll beat it, he said quickly. Name your price. Emma. I studied him for a moment. This man who had taken my loyalty for granted for so long, who was only valuing me now that my absence was costing him money and status. I wasn't asking for money. Jason, I said, my voice calm and clear. I was asking for respect, something you only realized when it was too late. People make mistakes, he insisted, leaning forward. The company needs you. I need you. That's the problem, I replied, gathering my purse as I prepared to leave. You only recognized my value when it became a crisis for you. That's not the kind of environment I want to return to. So that's it? His voice had an edge now, the desperation giving way to frustration. 6 years. And you just walk away? I stood up, feeling strangely peaceful. 6 years of giving you chances to do the right thing. I finally decided to do the right thing for myself. His face hardened. You know this won't last, right? Startups fail all the time. When Nexus Point crashes. Don't expect a welcome back, I smiled, genuinely amused by his inability to imagine a future where he wasn't in control. Goodbye. Jason, I wish you and Sunridge the best. As I walked out into the morning sunshine, my phone buzzed with a text from Greg. Board meeting went well. Green light on your expansion proposal. I typed back a quick reply, then slipped my phone into my pocket and took a deep breath of fresh air. Ahead of me stretched a day full of possibilities I was finally free to explore. What would your life look like if you stopped accepting less than you deserve? 1 week later, I returned to Sunridge one last time to collect the last of my belongings, items I'd left in storage that couldn't fit in my initial box. The office felt oddly unfamiliar already, as if my memory of the space had begun fading the moment I'd made the decision to leave. The receptionist, Alicia, brightened when she saw me. Emma, so good to see you. Her voice dropped to a whisper. It's been chaos here. 3 more people resigned yesterday. I signed the visitor log, accepting the temporary badge she handed me. I'm just here to grab a few things from storage. Won't take long. Take your time, she said with a meaningful look. Lots of people want to say goodbye properly. Indeed. My journey to the storage room became a procession of quiet conversations, colleagues stopping me in hallways, stepping out of conference rooms, or rolling their chairs into the corridor from their cubicles. The messages varied, but carried similar themes. I should have spoken up at that party. The way they treated you wasn't right. You deserve better than this place. Rachel met me at the storage room door, enveloping me in a tight hug. How's the new job? Everything I hoped it would be, I said honestly. We're building something meaningful there. She helped me sort through the remaining items, reference materials I'd accumulated, a few awards I'd forgotten about, backup files I no longer needed. They're saying the board is considering replacing Jason, she murmured, handing me a stack of folders. Too many clients leaving. Too much internal turmoil. I nodded, unsurprised but no longer invested in Sunridge's internal politics. Change might be good for everyone. As we finished packing a small box with the few items worth keeping, Brittany appeared in the doorway, hesitating as if unsure of her welcome. Emma, she said softly, do you have a minute? Rachel raised an eyebrow at me in silent question. I nodded, and she squeezed my arm before tactfully excusing herself. Brittany stepped into the room, looking smaller somehow, without Jason's spotlight illuminating her. I wanted to apologize, she said. I didn't understand. I didn't know the history. It's not your fault, I said, and meant it. You were offered an opportunity. Anyone would have taken it. I've stepped down, she said, twisting her hands together. I'm back as a specialist. It was too much. Too soon. I nodded, closing up my box. It was never about you. Brittany. I know that now. And she paused, then added, Everything's falling apart without you. I don't think Jason realized how much you actually did here. For a moment, I felt the ghost of my old responsibility, the urge to explain systems, to offer guidance, to fix what was broken. But that wasn't my role anymore. And the realization brought freedom rather than guilt. You'll figure it out. I said simply, change is hard, but sometimes necessary. She nodded, then stepped aside as I lifted my box. Good luck. Emma? You too. I replied, and meant that as well. Walking out of Sunridge for the final time felt surreal, like closing the cover on a book I'd read too many times. I passed Jason's office. The door closed, blinds drawn, no last confrontation, no dramatic final words. Some endings come not with explosions, but with quiet steps walking away. As the elevator doors closed, cutting off my view of the office that had been my professional home for 6 years, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't fully recognized until it was gone. Outside in the parking lot, I loaded the box into my car and took one last look at the Sunridge building, glass and steel reaching toward the Texas sky, impressive from the outside. I remembered how proud I'd been when I first walked through those doors, how certain I was that my future lay within those walls. Now my future stretched before me in directions I was only beginning to explore, and for the first time in years, that uncertainty felt like freedom rather than fear. Have you ever realized that what you thought was your destination was actually just a stopping point on a much longer journey? 1 month into my role at Nexus Point, I'd established new routines. My mornings began with coffee on my balcony instead of rushed preparation for early crisis management. I arrived at the office energized rather than already depleted. My ideas weren't just heard, but actively sought out. My expertise wasn't taken for granted, but valued as essential. My new office reflected this shift. Personal touches I'd never allowed myself at Sunridge now adorned the space. Photos of family and friends. A small plant Rachel had given me as a parting gift. Books I'd actually have time to reference. It felt like a physical manifestation of my newfound permission to fully exist in my professional space. The work itself was challenging in the best way, building systems from the ground up rather than constantly patching failing ones, making decisions based on potential rather than solely responding to crises. For the first time in years, I found myself thinking beyond the next quarter, the next week, the next hour. Greg had assembled a team that functioned on mutual respect rather than hierarchical power plays. Our weekly leadership meetings were collaborative rather than competitive, focused on solutions rather than assigning blame. I found myself mentoring new team members not out of obligation, but genuine desire to see them succeed. The clients who had followed me from Sunridge were thriving under our new approach. Frank Henderson himself had called to tell me their satisfaction metrics were higher than they'd been in years. "Whatever you're doing over there," he'd said, "keep doing it. We're finally getting the service we're paying for." On a crisp autumn morning, as I reviewed our quarterly projections, my phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "Thought you should know. Board voted yesterday. Jason's out. Effective immediately. Restructuring announcement going out today." I set the phone down and turned back to my window, watching clouds drift across the Austin skyline. The news landed differently than I might have expected, not as vindication or triumph, but as the logical conclusion to a story that no longer felt like mine. My phone buzzed again. "Also, sending you my resume. Need a change? Coffee soon?" I smiled, typing back, "Absolutely. And we're hiring." Later that afternoon, as I sat in our conference room leading a strategy session, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the glass wall. Confident, engaged, speaking with authority to a team that valued my input. The contrast with my former self was striking. The woman who had shrunk herself to fit into spaces too small for her potential, who had accepted promises instead of demanding action. When the meeting concluded successfully, I returned to my office to find a small package on my desk. Inside was a framed quote, a gift from Greg marking my 1-month anniversary at Nexus Point. The words resonated with unexpected force. "Your worth isn't determined by how others value you, but by how you finally learn to value yourself." I placed it on my desk where I could see it daily. A reminder of lessons, hard won but essential. That evening, as I sipped coffee in my new office, reviewing plans for the coming quarter, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. The journey from that painful party to this peaceful present hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. Sometimes walking away isn't an act of surrender, but the ultimate form of self-respect. I opened my laptop to respond to Frank Henderson's latest email about expanding our services. As I typed, I smiled to myself, finally understanding a truth that had eluded me for years. Sometimes, to reclaim your worth, you have to walk away and let them deal with the fallout. Have you ever discovered that your greatest professional growth came not from climbing a ladder, but from having the courage to build an entirely new one? Sometimes, losing what you thought you needed is exactly what sets you free. If this story touched something inside you, a buried hurt, a quiet strength, a dream you almost gave up on, know this: you're not alone, and you never were. I'd love for you to subscribe, leave a comment about where you are on your journey, and share one thing you refuse to settle for anymore. Every voice matters. Every comeback deserves to be heard. And your story. It might just be the light someone else needs to find their way back to themselves. Let's keep building something real, together.